The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom. Rational self-interest. And individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it? It's September 2nd. September 2nd is Atlas Shrugged Day. This is the day that Ayn Rand, first day that Ayn Rand sat down to write Atlas Shrugged. God, I don't know the year. It was finished in 57, so published in 57, so what would it be in 45? But yes, happy Atlas Shrugged Day to everybody, and welcome to Yaron Brook Show. Hope everybody's having a fantastic weekend. And ready for September. God, it's already September 2nd. All right, a few things. Let me know what you think of the sound. New sound setup, giving me a lot of options, a lot of control, a lot of new things I can do. Just started setting it up, so it's not fully set up yet. Don't have the sound effects down yet. I don't have the music and everything. But yeah, let me know if you notice any change. If it sounds better, worse, same. Did the music sound the same, better, worse, just fine, just okay? Yeah, let me know, because I've got a new little. Setup gizmo here. I'm not going to turn it up to 11 because that'll blow your ears. I mean, this is loud enough. No reason to blow it out of that. All right. I am going to get some sound effects just for entertainment purposes, like, so every time, I don't know, Scott or somebody else says something stupid, I can make a stupid sound or something like that. Anyway, just kidding. But we'll create some sound effects and other things, and we'll see how that goes. Let me see. There was something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember what it was. There was some other issue that came up. Sound is good. That's it. Cool. All right. I can't remember. All right. I will remind you all that you can use the Super Chat feature to ask questions, shape the show, orient it towards the direction you would like it to go. And so questions are welcome, and questions with dollar signs next to them are doubly welcome. And the bigger the dollar sign, the more welcome they are. If you want to support the Yaron Brook Show on a monthly basis, on a regular basis, you can do so by signing up, by basically signing up on Patreon or on yaronbrookshow.com/support. I'm trying to think. There's a bunch of stuff I wanted, and I should have written it down, of course. Because I haven't written it down. I just can't remember what they all are. All right, remember $20 questions get preference, and they also help us get to the goal much, much faster, so consider that as well. All right, so we're going to talk about a few things today. We're talking about Western civilization, its fragility, it being under attack. Is it going to collapse? Are we in a doom loop? Are we on the verge of the end of it? It always seems that way, and it doesn't seem to happen. We'll talk about tax fairness only in the context of James sent me this video about relative taxes between the U.S. and the U.K. What's more fair? I'll talk a little bit about that. I think the question is wrong in a sense, the whole approach. I'm not going to show the video you sent me, James. If you're there, I'll talk about why I'm not going to show it in a minute. And then I've got a song review of a song. I'll figure out what song it is in a minute. And also, I promised a review, which I owe for a long time, of The Last of Us, Episode 3. The Last of Us episode 3, so I'll review that one as well. And we could talk, so we'll talk about that as well. I'll remind you, I do TV show episodes for $250, movies for $500, and songs for $100. All of that is available in terms of reviews. All right. Yeah, I mean, next week's shows are, as usual, nothing special there. Okay, let's talk about Western civilization and where we go from there. And oh yeah, I did want to say this. I just saw just before the show started, I saw this video clip of a libertarian criticizing me, criticizing Knowles and criticizing me, and making fun of my. I guess making fun. It's a short clip, so it's hard to tell, but it certainly seems that way. Particularly but criticizing Michael Knowles around that Orban interview, which I showed you. You saw my show on it, where I guess Orban is saying they're hyper individualists, and then there are people who say family, nation, and God, and the libertarian is saying. But that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. How can he call us hyper-individualists? How can he call us individualists? We trade with other people. We produce stuff and then interact with other people. So we're not hyper-individualists because we trade with other people. We produce for them and they consume from us. And, capitalism benefits everybody who participates productively. So we're not hyper-individualists. That is so shallow and silly and superficial an understanding of what individualism is. You don't go into a trade in order to benefit the other side. You're going to trade to benefit yourself. You produce in order to make your life better. There is nobody in the whole history of the world, as far as I can remember right now, that argues that individualism means, as a supporter of individualism, nobody who is a proponent of individualism who says, oh no, we should all live on desert islands, we should all live by ourselves and shouldn't interact with anybody else, and trade, oh my God, trade is the worst. And that's ridiculous. That's bizarre. That's like the king of all straw men. Nobody's ever made that argument. Nobody makes that argument on the pro-individualist side. Individualism means pursuing your own values. Individualism means having your own values and your own happiness, but primarily your own values as, as your guide. Using your own mind to pursue your own values, your own mind, not being a second-hander, not just following orders, not doing what the collective tells you, but thinking for yourself. That's what individualism means. So, of course, individualism implies trade, but again, you're not trading in order to make the world a better place. The world will become a better place, but not because... So, libertarians, it's so... silly and ugly, and then he has a parting comment about how objectivists support Dresden and Nagasaki and Hiroshima, so we're the real collectivists. No, we're just egoists. We don't want to die, and we're willing to kill the enemy who started the war to prevent ourselves from dying. That's pretty individualistic and egoistic and rational. But okay, that's for another show, another time. All right, I just thought I'd mention that just because I just saw it before I dropped up. He tagged me on this little video on Twitter. Ooh, God, how shallow can a libertarian get? Very shallow, very shallow. It turns out. All right, Western civilization. So we've talked a lot about Western civilization in Yaron Brook show. I've defined it. We've talked about its history. We've talked about its fundamental principles. But constantly you see this argument regarding It's fragility. It's on the verge of collapse. It might be on the verge of collapse because we've got hordes of barbarians who are non-Western civ people coming from the outside. It's on the verge of collapse because of immigration. Immigrants are going to destroy Western civilization. It's on the verge of collapse because the left just doesn't get it. The left is advocating for nihilistic policies that are just going to destroy everything that is good about Western civilization, and it's going to self-destruct. It could be, and if you listen to my show, maybe this is the message you get, that it's religion. It's the religious right. The religion is going to destroy Western civilization. We're on the brink of annihilation, and any day now, Western civilization is going to end. It's super fragile. It's not being defended by anybody, and therefore it will indeed collapse and disappear. Or you might believe that, the war in Ukraine, no matter what side you take of that war, whether it's Vladimir Putin or whether it's Ukrainian, but the war in Ukraine will destroy Western civilization, whether you think it's because Vladimir Putin is going to use nuclear weapons and like Jordan Peterson, or whether you think that Ukraine might win and then by extension the left wings and then Western civilization is destroyed. One way or the other, everybody out there is convinced Western civilization is in decline, and is not just in decline, it is, but it is on the verge of collapse, destruction. It's super fragile. It doesn't take much, and it's gone. And I think we suffer from that. We suffer from that as objectivists because there's a tendency within objectivism to say, look, here are the philosophical ideas that are required to sustain Western civilization. Here are the philosophical ideas that made Western civilization a reality. Those ideas are slowly being diminished. They're slowly going away. They're being under attack constantly. Ayn Rand is the only one defending those ideas. Ayn Rand is too small. There are too few of us. And as a consequence, those ideas, since the ideas are gone, Western civilization is gone as well. So I want to push back a little bit on all of that, although, of course, there's some truth to everything that I've said in terms of the dangers to Western civilization. We talk about it a lot on this show in terms of those dangers. But I want to talk about this idea of fragility and how fragile it is, and could it just disappear, and could it just collapse? Is it like, and I'm actually, as you know, I'm reading this book on Christendom, so we've covered kind of the collapse of Rome and the transition into the Middle Ages or the early Middle Ages. He doesn't like to use the term Dark Ages, but I will, the Dark Ages. And could it happen? Could Western civilizations just fall off a cliff? Could it truly just collapse? And I think the answer is, of course, yes. But I think the fuller answer is it's very unlikely. And if it's going to happen, it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be a slow glide. It's not going to be one of those falling off a cliff kind of events. At least I don't expect it to be such. And why is that? And I want here to step back from kind of how we've always defined Western civilization. If you follow the show, I always talk about it in terms of Western civilization being this basically two ideas: the idea of reason, the efficacy of reason, and the idea of individualism. And those combined have created, those taken seriously, have created the world in which we recognize as Western civilization. And Western civilization really is a project. The project started, if you will, in the Renaissance, reached its height maybe with the creation of the United States of America. And Western civilization is still gliding based on those ideas, the ideas explicitly developed during the Enlightenment, but inspired really from the Renaissance onwards. And all that story is the right story. It's a story, I think it's a true story, and I think everything I read only supports and reaffirms that. So those ideas, the ideas of the Enlightenment, kind of launched this civilization. They made possible this civilization. But when you look around today, how does that civilization manifest itself? It doesn't manifest itself in people writing about reason and individualism. It doesn't manifest itself in good philosophers, unfortunately. I wish they were good philosophers, but it doesn't manifest itself by thousands of intellectuals advocating for the ideas of the Enlightenment, sadly, right? Where is Western civilization? What would you point at if you were going to point at what is Western civilization? What constitutes the West today? And I'd say it's the implicit manifestations of individualism and reason. So what are those? What are the manifestations of them in people's day-to-day lives? Well, one, I'd say if we're looking at the concept of individualism, it certainly is a culture of consumption, a culture of production, a culture where people pursue careers, a culture where people pursue buying cool stuff for whom? For themselves. It's a culture of fashion. It's a culture of cool toys. It's a culture of amazing electronics. It's a culture of just people on a day-to-day basis having the focus on producing, but then using that production for their own well-being in one way or another, whether it's to get a massage or whether it's to read a book or whether it's to buy a nice clothes or whether it's all of those manifestations. So, yeah, I mean, as objectivists, we're geared towards looking first at production and the businessmen, and that's all true. But in terms of the masses, in terms of the mass of humanity is embedded in Western civ to the extent that they value their own life, their own happiness, their own enjoyment, and that they have the opportunity to express that in the marketplace. And it's fascinating to see that everywhere you go, that Western civilization touches, what you see is that it being one of the expressions of that. So if you go to Japan or you go to South Korea, or even if you go to China, or if you go to Thailand, if you go to a lot of these places, one of the manifestations of Western civilization is the mall. And the orientation of the people there to go and buy cool stuff and buy nice stuff for themselves. I mean, it's amazing. First time I was in China, to see in the streets of Shanghai all the luxury stores, Louis Vuitton and Chanel and Cartier and all of these things. It's like, the part of the things that made it very real to me that there's no communism here. You don't have those kind of things in communism. You certainly don't have them out in the public. Maybe the high ups go to the West and buy those stuff for their wives, but they're not on display on the main streets with big billboards and big signs. So it's a certain spirit and orientation that, in some sense comes easy to people, right? Once they're exposed to it, once they have the wealth to experience it, once they immediately want it and they immediately jump on it. And of course, to do that, you have to produce, and the idea is you get to choose production, you get to choose a career, you get to choose the work that you do. That's all features of Western civilization. Didn't exist in pre-Westernized Japan or Korea or Europe or China. Career choice, romantic choice. So one of the most important expressions of Western civilization, in other words, one of the most important expressions of individualism, is choices. The ability of people to make choices. And their interest and willingness to go out there and do that. And do that wherever they gain the liberty to do it, they jump on it. And if you look at the world, in spite of how pessimistic one could become, if you look at the world today versus 50 years ago, think of how many more people in the world, in the globe today, have choices. Choices about lots of things about their lives. About what career to pursue, what job to have, who to fall in love with, who to marry, what stuff to buy, how much of that stuff to buy, where to live. They can move up to a point, right? But choices are the way in which individualism manifests itself. In pre-Enlightenment Europe, you didn't choose who to marry. That was arranged by your family. You didn't choose what profession. You went into whatever profession your father had, and women had no choices, period, about anything in their life, really. You didn't choose when to have kids and when not to have kids. No birth control. Birth control provides choices. Product of science. So individualism manifests itself in the availability of choices out there. And I just want to say how easy do you think it's going to be to take those choices away from people? To bring people back to a world of 1220, right, Michael Knowles, where they don't have choices, where they're giving up those choices, where somebody else makes decisions for them. Now, there's a sense in which that's already happening. The regulatory state, the tax state is already doing that. But it does it purposefully in a stealthy way in order to keep us living, thinking we have as many choices as we always have. Indeed, the pretense of the regulatory state is they're protecting us so that we can have those choices. So, not easy for people to give up those choices. And when people take away those choices, there's a backlash. Always is. Always is. Because people don't understand the ideas necessary to defend individualism. People don't understand the concept of individualism. Even libertarians don't, as we saw from the video I described. But they know its manifestation, and they know what they like about it, and they know what they want about it, and they're not going to give that up easily. And even if they give it up in a particular place easily, it's a global phenomenon now. In a sense, the West is now global, and people want it. Even people who live in places that don't have as many choices. They want more. That's why one of the big reasons why they want to get up and move to places like the United States and Europe where they can gain those choices. So I think implicitly this idea of individualism is strong. Now, I completely agree with Rand and everyone that ultimately the implicit is not enough. Ultimately, this gets eroded slowly, systematically. One day, it won't exist, at least in any particular geographic area. But it's hard to do. It takes a long time, much longer than I think anybody anticipates. And it's not necessarily going to be a global phenomenon. It's not necessarily going to be the choices that's taken away from people everywhere. Right? So, yeah, I mean, Western civilization is about people being able to choose what kind of life they want to live, what, where, how, with what, right? And with whom they want to live. And to a large extent, it's very difficult to take that away from them. Now, you notice the Dugin quote that I gave you the other day, right? The Dugin quote. It was kind of a funny quote. It says, yeah, we need to get used to buying things that are Russian. We need to get used to saying goodbye to the West. Notice it's not just about saying goodbye to the West because we're saying goodbye to Western stuff. And now we're stuck with Russian stuff that doesn't work, that's expensive, that's all the things he said, which was kind of funny. I hope that's a real quote, but that was kind of funny. But it's much more than that. We have to say goodbye to the West in terms of literally having the choices. We won't have the choices. Just like in the Soviet Union, you'll buy the things that the party produces. You'll buy the things that Russian industrial policy produces. You won't have choices. And that backtracking away from choices can happen maybe pretty fast in Russia. And even there, it won't be easy. And even there, a lot of people are leaving as a consequence. A lot of people are leaving Russia because of that. And more will leave in the future if they have the opportunity to do so. So giving up on the West is giving up on options, choices, giving up on individualism. That's what individualism means. It means the recognition that individuals should make their own decisions about their own values, guided by their own minds, choices, rather than told what to do, how to live, as so many on left and right would like to impose on us. The second idea of Western civilization is, of course, the idea of reason. And this, of course, is under attack even more than individualism and has been for a long time. And yet, it continues to thrive out there in our, granted, declining, but still existing respect for science, the realm of reason, engineering, innovation, progress. I mean, all of that is an implicit recognition of, the value of reason, the value of the mind. I mean, even the idea of individualism is, of course, dependent on the idea of reason because individuals need a mind in order to make choices. If we all assumed, if the assumption in the culture was, well, people are stupid, people are irrational, people have no way to make choices, have no way to decide, then we wouldn't, in a sense, we wouldn't leave them free to do so. The leaving them free to do so implicitly, again, rests on the idea that they're capable of making choices for themselves, at least to some extent. Don't want to overdo it, but at least to some extent. And there's very little guidance out there that says, yeah, you should just follow your emotions, don't think. Thinking is bad for you. I mean, some people argue that, but they're really, nobody takes them seriously. Not really, not in large scale. I mean, there's argument about how much to think and what thinking is, but on a cultural level, not on a day-to-day level, not in the philosophy departments or in academia. On a day-to-day level, people expected to think through problems and to solve them. And whether you call it reason or something else, people expect it to be, at least to some extent, outside of the realm maybe of politics and relationships. In most things in their life, they're expected to be somewhat rational, somewhat reasonable. Think. And of course, there is this massive campaign, again, for both left and right, saying you can't think for yourself. Don't try it. There's a God. That's truth. All you need to know is to know God. You don't need to think for that. Or reality doesn't exist, the world doesn't exist, don't need to think about that. There's no point in thinking because you can't achieve anything. It's a dead end. Postmodernism, critical race theory, all of that stuff is all kind of based on this idea of the impotence of the human mind. But again, at a cultural level, at the day-to-day level, at the level of how people interact, the assumption is that reason is, that the mind is, that thinking is a good thing. And that's going to be very difficult to dislodge. So when immigrants come to us to move to the United States from cultures that don't allow for choices, don't allow for thinking, authoritarian, violent in their nature, they come to us, and what happens? They say, "Oh, I really miss that violence and lack of choices. I'm gonna adopt that ideology here in my new place." I mean, that would be nuts. They know why they're leaving. They know why they're coming. They might not know the full implications of it. They might not know the full implications of what their particular vote or their particular habits have to do with, the long-term potential of individualism and reason to exist. They don't think in those terms, certainly. But the reality is they come here for the choices. They come here to use their mind. They come here to pursue their values, And if our civilization is worth anything, if Western civilization is worth anything, then it should be easy for us to assimilate them and to have the confidence to embrace them and make them part of our civilization. To fear them and to view them as causing our decline gives them a lot more power, given that Western civilization is the best civilization ever in history and is embraced by almost every culture that has the opportunity to do so. If it's in Asia, if it's in South America, if it's in Asia, if it's in Africa, wherever it is, they embrace elements of it to the extent that they can. So I find this fear of the immigrant is bizarre, because just a little bit of confidence on our part and they become us. Just a little bit of confidence on our part, even more confidence on our part, and a better foreign policy, many countries around the world become us, embrace Western civilization. But that requires a little bit more work. And the same is true of the left and the religious conservatives and so on. Most people, put it this way, whatever negative impact they're going to have, and they're going to have a negative impact, is slow, it's erosive, it's long-term, it's already been they've been around for a long time, they've been promoting their ideas for a long time. And at its core, day-to-day life in America is still pretty much the same as it used to be, in spite of the frustrations of those who resent rich men north of Richmond. American life is not that different than it was 50, 60, 100 years ago, and in many respects, it's much better. We're richer. In some ways, free speech today is better protected in America than it was 100 years ago. Your individual right to sexual orientation, to sex generally, to all kinds of things. Remember, Lenny Bruce was arrested in the 1960s for saying on a private stage, with the owner's approval, the F word. He was jailed for that. Can you imagine that? Now, take for example, COVID, lockdowns, mandates, the horrors of that. Yeah, it was truly horrible, and it was a horrible sign of I guess what is possible. But look how but looking back at it, look at how quickly we rebounded. Look at how quickly we've been back to normal. Now, have we learned the right lesson? Is this a precursor to an authoritarian state in the future? Maybe. Or maybe we learned that we don't like lockdowns and they were real infringement and we won't tolerate them next time. We'll see. But yeah, lockdowns were horrific. They were anti-Western. They were denial of our reason and a denial of our choices. But when they went away quickly. And they disappeared quickly. Ooh, Robert Garmong is here. Hey, Robert. I hope you're recuperating. Robert is getting treated for cancer in China, which is, I'm sure, an interesting experience. But I think I read somewhere that Robert says that in some ways, Chinese healthcare system is freer in some ways than it is in the United States, and I kind of believe that. I mean, that is interesting. Great to have you here on the chat, Robert. All right. Let's see. What was I? I mean, lockdowns in the United States, look how normal life is today, given that. I mean, it's no excuse. I'm not excusing anything. Evil happens. That was evil. But did that evil fundamentally change Western civ? Did it fundamentally change our culture and our lives? Luckily, the answer is no. Because we are resilient. We're not fragile. We went back to normal. And maybe next time, we'll rebel even sooner and prevent them from even starting it. Okay, so my point is basically that I think that Western civilization is a lot more resilient than many people give it credit. I don't fear immigrants. I don't think any of us should fear immigrants. I mean, I was just looking at, the growth and the changes in population across Europe. And countries like France's population have expanded dramatically. Is France having problems? Absolutely. Did they have horrible riots with immigrants? Absolutely. But is France on the verge of abandoning all Western civ? No. French economy is doing fairly well. People in France still make the choices. France will survive as long as it stands up to violence, will survive its, the barbarism of some of its immigrants. It's just like we survived BLM riots in 2020. Just like we are surviving the violent spike in 2021, 22, it's massively in decline this year. Violence is down. France will survive it. France has grown significantly. The UK has grown a lot. Now, the UK is struggling economically. It's got a lot of economic problems, but none of that has to do with immigrants. It has to do with Brits, do with bad policies. But the UK has grown significantly and has massive immigration. It's not, though, on the brink of losing its fundamental character as Western. On the contrary, what happens to immigrants is they become Westernized. They gain respect for the choices they have. Now, if the culture is weak, like it is in the West today, in terms of explicitly advocating for these ideas, then it takes maybe a generation or two. If the culture is strong, like it is a little bit more in the United States, like it could be if we had the right ideas, then it would be almost immediate. Then the melting pot really works. The melting pot is strong. And one of the beauties of the melting pot is, because I think it's a good metaphor, is that Western civilization, one of its strengths is that it looks around and it identifies good things in other cultures and just embraces them and just makes it part of it. Yeah, I know people are panicking because of Sharia law in Europe. There is no Sharia in Europe. There are anti-blasphemy laws passed in Denmark. I criticized those a few days ago in the show. and they're horrible, and they're disgusting, and they need to be fought, but they're not the end of the West. There are a lot of bad things that have been happening. I mean, the West survived communism. Western civilization survived fascism and Nazism. And the West has every possibility of surviving what's going on right now in Europe. Now, the more explicitly the West understands its own values, the more explicitly the West stands up for its own values, the most explicitly the West understands that it's the greatest civilization in human history and is willing to defend that fact, the easier assimilation becomes and the less pain we will have to go through in defending it. The weaker we are, the less we talk about it, the more dangerous it's going to become. And ultimately, Western civilization will erode and disappear. It takes a long time, though. And those of you who are young, it's been like this forever. Western civilization has been under attack forever. I mean, blasphemy laws right now in Europe and the Muslims in Europe are nothing like the existence of the Soviet Union. They're nothing like communism within and without. Communism was a much bigger threat to Western civilization. We survived it. We'll probably survive this, although we're weaker today, so maybe we won't. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. And the pessimism and the hysteria and the panic and the fear is just unwarranted. Yes, history is shaped by philosophical ideas, but not in the way you think. Not these philosophers rise and therefore civilization immediately adjusts to their philosophy. No, we're still shaped by philosophical ideas, and the West is still shaped implicitly by the Enlightenment. And there's still enough rational voices in this civilization to keep us going. We get weaker and weaker every time. Weaker and weaker every time. But we're still standing, and we will continue to stand. Immigrants didn't destroy Rome. I mean, this is, I don't know where you get this real superficial and understanding of history. Rome invited immigrants in out of a position of strength. Rome was destroyed from within. Rome was weakened from within. Rome was destroyed by Christianity. It was destroyed by its own hedonistic and nihilistic values that weakened it. But Christianity had a huge role in weakening Rome. And the barbarians who sacked Rome were actually Christians. So it was more now an internal dispute within the empire, within a Christian empire, than it was true barbarians from some other place rejecting Roman values. Roman values were already gone by the time they were sacked. By the time Rome was sacked. So again, I'm not trying to be Pollyannish here in the sense that Western civilization cannot disappear. It can. And the more we fear the other, the more we fear the less Western we are. But if we believe in the greatness of Western civilization, we should be arguing for its greatness. We should be promoting its greatness. We should be arguing for its superiority, for how great it is, and trying to expand its reach, not build walls around it and not cower in fear and hide in a corner because we're afraid. I had this dispute with Douglas Murray because Douglas Murray, in an event in Rotterdam, I think it was Rotterdam. We had this event in Rotterdam, and Douglas Murray's view is, the Muslims are going to destroy Western civilization. My view is that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. The only thing that can destroy Western civilization is us turning our backs on it. And part of the way to turn our backs on it is, in the name of protecting it, retreat from it. In the name of defending it, abandon it. The ideology that ultimately would destroy Western civilization is Viktor Orban's ideology. It's, oh my God, we have to protect Western civilization, which means religion, so we need to do away with liberty and freedom, and we need to restrain and constrain and limit individual freedom, all in the name of family, nation, and God. The enemy is among us, and it is us. It is not out there. And again, just go to, one of the amazing things is you go to places in Asia and, they're very Western. They're very Western because human beings, Western civilization is attuned to human beings. It's attuned to human needs. All right, I think I've gone too long on this. So I don't believe it's fragile. I believe it can go away. It's certainly being eroded, Western civilization, but it's going to take a lot more than what they're throwing at it right now to get rid of it. It's not 1619 is not going to destroy it. It's not woke's. The woke's just the latest PC. This is another one of those cycles. And the left's attempt to destroy Western civilization. Now we have the right wing's attempt to destroy Western civilization. But I think ultimately, while we continue to erode it, it's much less fragile than every generation seems to think it is. And I look forward to having the same discussion with you guys in 10 years. And hopefully we'll be starting to move Western civilization in the right direction at that point. Not to the right, in the right direction at that point. And away from this fear. Fear is going to destroy Western civilization to a large extent. All right, don't forget to ask questions. We've got quite a few in the $2 to $10 range. We need a few more in the $20 to $50 range, so please jump in with that. All right, so I want to address a video that James sent me, James G, who often asks questions here and is a regular super chat contributor, and he sent me a video to talk about and some money associated with it. But I don't see James here, unfortunately. James, yeah. So again, he's a regular on the super chat, particularly on the news briefing. But what he sent me is a video of a young guy in the UK discussing the differences in tax regime between the United States and the UK, and kind of bemoaning the fact that the US system seems to be a lot more fair than the system in the UK. He's obviously from the UK. He feels like he's being screwed by a tax system that is less fair than the US system. US system seems to be more fair. Why is the US? So first, let's say why he thinks the US system is more fair. I mean, let me just say, I'm not showing the video because the video is, it's a pretty bad video. The video is so full of errors, factual errors, and just a complete misunderstanding of economics, a misunderstanding of the tax system, a misunderstanding of how it works, certainly a misunderstanding of the U.S. system, complete. So I'd have to comment on every 2 seconds of it because it's all wrong. Everything pretty much is wrong. But his argument is the U.S. taxes wealth much more than the UK. The UK focuses on taxing income. And taxing wealth is more fair than taxing income. Now, so let me just say, first of all, that's a bizarre interpretation of fairness. Taxation is not fair, period. Taxation is, by, direct extrapolation, taxation is theft. And there is no, when you're taking somebody's stuff, there's no fairness involved. There's no fair way to take somebody else's stuff. And you're taking it by force, and you're not providing him a value in return. Or the value is very distant. You're taking much more than the value you're providing is worth. national defense and police, right? But you're taking a lot more than just that. So the whole idea of fairness is wrong. But also this view that America taxes wealth and the UK does not, I think is flawed. And his main argument about that is that the United States taxes has property taxes, and the UK doesn't. Which the UK has kind of something called the council tax, but a council tax is not linked directly to the value of property and doesn't go up ad infinitum in terms of its level. Now, why is it fair to tax my property? Notice that property tax is a double tax. I earned income on which was taxed. I accumulated it, bought some property, a house, with after-tax dollars. And now it's going to be taxed again because I used that money to buy a house. If I used that money to buy stocks, it wouldn't be taxed. If I used that money to buy stuff, well, there's sales tax, but there's sales tax, another double tax, right? Not every state has a sales tax. Some states don't have sales tax. So property is double taxation. There's nothing fair, good, decent, any respect around that. So it's irrelevant. And notice that property taxes in the United States are done by local government, almost all to fund education. It's how most school districts are funded, is through property taxes. That doesn't justify it. It's an immoral tax. It's wrong. It's basically a violation of our property rights. I mean, you don't really own property in the U.S. You're renting it from the government, and the best illustration of that is try not paying it. The UK, of course, has VAT, which is much higher than sales tax, which is another form of double taxation. So it's terrible. Generally, taxes in Europe are worse than in the US, but that's primarily because they're higher and they encompass more things. But this guy is advocating for now a property tax in the UK to make the UK better somehow. And then when he talks about income taxes, he says they're higher in the UK, which is true, but they're not that much higher in the UK when you take into account the fact that the United States will also pay state income taxes. Now, not everywhere, but if you take into account state, local, and federal taxes, they're not that much higher in Europe. Certainly not if you live in New York or in California or in New York City. Maybe if you live in Florida, then you only pay the federal taxes, and those are lower. But again, if you live in states that have state income taxes, you're not paying less. And of course, states that have lower or zero state income tax often have higher property tax, which is another form of double taxation, which seems unbelievably unfair. By the way, his whole context of unfairness is tax the rich, that's fair, right? So tax property, that's fair. And then he talks about the inheritance tax and the fact that in England, even though they have an inheritance tax, rich people can get around it and avoid it because I guess they don't pay inheritance tax on property. But that's true in the U.S. I mean, wealthy people create trusts and estates and all kinds of mechanisms by which they avoid paying inheritance taxes. Inheritance taxes primarily affect upper middle class and small businesses more than anybody else, and they get hammered by them. And estate taxes are awful. Again, another form of double taxation. You've paid income tax, you paid property tax, and now you pay an inheritance tax. 3 ways of taxation. So anyway, I'm sorry, James, the video is just full of, everything about that video is wrong. And there is no fair tax system. I mean, there are ways to create one that is better economically. There are ways to create a tax system that is, in some sense, fairer in the sense that it doesn't tax rich people more. See, I think any tax system that taxes rich people more than everybody else is unfair. So a flat tax is fairer, in quotes, than a progressive tax. A consumption tax is, quote, fairer than other forms of taxation, and better economically. But the examples this guy gives in the video, none of them are fair, none of them are right, none of them make any sense, and the comparisons just don't add up. They don't add up. All right, lastly, we've got a couple of quick reviews, and then we'll go to your questions. Please feel free to ask questions. I mean, I know a lot of you had comments about my stuff on Western civilization and how bad Europe is, about how bad this is, how bad that is. Ask me a question, challenge me in the super chat. That's the best way, because there I actually respond directly to what you're writing. I can't follow the chat while I'm speaking to be able to completely respond. You know, some people have already asked about that topic, but use the opportunity. You know, again, you can do it at $5 or $2 in some cases. Ideally, you do it at $20. But use the super chat. Use it as an opportunity to challenge me, question me, contradict me, and ask me questions. All right, one is a song. This is John Glue, who's I guess not here, but John asked me to review the song "Dead" by They Might Be Giants. They Might Be Giants, which is a band, and the song is "Dead." So this is a song that's it's got a very whimsical harmony melody. It doesn't have much of a melody, but it's very whimsical. It's lighthearted, and the words, the way it's sung, kind of is whimsical, but the content is pretty serious and depressing. It's about dying without having the opportunity to actually live. It's about not taking full advantage of the life that you have. It's about the missed opportunities that so many people experience in their lives, and it really is focused on how terrible it is to have those missed opportunities. But it doesn't give you any hope. It's not presenting that as go live, go take advantage. It's just how awful that I expired before I had a chance to really live. So I find that the lyrics depressing and they're not inspiring, and they're not particularly, I don't think they're particularly clever. But what I really didn't like about the song, and I don't like the song, is, and sorry guys, I know I don't like a lot of the music you send me, is the actual music. I find it dull and boring and repetitive, and there's some harmony, some interesting harmonies there, attempted some interesting harmonies, but not that, I mean, not that interesting, not that original. I found it mainly boring, and the music, the lyrics, somewhat interesting because you're trying to figure out what are they talking about. But at the end, pretty depressing, with no hope and no upside, just everything that's bad. So the music's just not good. The music's not good. This is the song "Dead" by They Might Be Giants. I mean, they have nice voices. There's harmony there. You could tell that this group probably has some good songs, but this one is not one I liked. So, sorry, John. All right, finally, I was asked, I think it was Shazbot, maybe it was somebody else, to review the episode in The Last of Us. I don't know if you guys saw The Last of Us on HBO. What used to be HBO, now it's called Max. And this is episode 3 in The Last of Us. And, The Last of Us was I thought, a very good show. I think episode 3 is one of the best episodes in the show. But the show generally, I thought, was excellent. And I think what made it a particularly good show, and the final episode of the show was very controversial. But I think what makes the show particularly good, and why it rose so much above, I think, the video game itself. This is a show based on a video game, and why most critics said that it was better than a video game. Now, I don't know if it's better than a video game because I don't play video games, but those of you who do probably know this game, is that the show was very focused on characters. It was very focused on the stories of people, the choices individual people made. And that's what made it powerful. The good choices, the bad choices. Always the focus was on the characters. Love them, hate them. Now, remember, this is a post-apocalyptic movie about zombies. It's a zombie movie. It's the only zombie TV series I've ever watched, actually. And I watched it because the characters were really interesting from the beginning. And the zombies, except for a few episodes, don't play that big of a role in the movie. They kind of move elements of the plot along. They create the circumstances. But what's really the focus is on what happens to these characters. How do they respond to these events? How do they live their lives given the circumstances that they've embedded in? Episode 3 is a good example of this. Episode 3 is about a guy who is a survivalist. So when this post-apocalyptic thing happens, in a sense, he is ready. He is the only person who survives in his neighborhood. He immediately builds a fence around the neighborhood, protects that fence, electrifies it. He has, I can't remember if it's a generator or he produces electricity somehow. He manages to produce electricity. He grows his own food. He's got a massive pile of weapons that he has stacked, for a long time. And he is basically has isolated himself in this place. He is going to survive. He's a survivalist. He's ready. And this post-apocalyptic thing is not going to touch him. But it's kind of sad because here he is alone in this thing. And he interacts a little bit with people who pass through this. And he trades with them. But many of them are crooks and robbers and want to steal from him. And he fights them off. He kills them if he's necessary. And he fights them off. Anyway, at some point, he encounters this other man. He invites him in, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but basically what they discover is that they are both gay, and that they both like each other, and the rest of the episode is like about the life they build together, and it really is quite beautiful. It's here are two people who thought they were going to be alone for the rest of their lives. They're living in a post-apocalyptic world. They're living in a world where the pursuit of values is almost impossible. Talk about the collapse of Western civilization. There is no civilization. It's gone. People want to kill them on the outside. There are a few people here and there that they interact with and can trade with, but generally they don't trust anybody. They can't trust anybody. It's just them. And yet, what the episode illustrates is how the two of them, kind of build a life and create a life together that is loving and beautiful and values-oriented to the extent that the pursuit of values is possible within the constraints that are being created from the outside world. And it's a beautiful, touching love story. And it's a beautiful, touching love story in the context of you can still pursue values even when the world around you is falling apart. And I say this to you guys where the world is not falling apart. We do not have zombies running around in the streets. The population of the earth is not a tiny fraction, maybe 1% or less of what it was in the past. The Western civilization has not completely collapsed. Values are attainable. And so many people do less in pursuit of their own personal values than these two guys in the middle of a completely destroyed world. They listen to music, they take walks, they do wonderful, fun things together. They enjoy each other. And they sustain their life. They work in order they grow their vegetables, they go hunting, they do the things that are necessary in order to sustain their life. And at the end, one of them is gravely ill and is slowly deteriorating. And of course, there's no medicine, no hospitals. and they sustain him as much as they can. And then he says, and I thought this was super beautiful and right. He says, look, I'm just a burden on you. I'm not enjoying my life anymore. Life is it's too much pain. It's just not enjoyable. I want to die. And it's a case of assisted suicide. So he gets to commit suicide. And his partner in this situation says, look, if you're going to die, I don't want to live alone. This world it's a dead end. It's finished. I'm not going to find anybody else, and there's nothing else out there for me. And the values are values we share together, and I don't want to continue living. And what happens is that they both commit suicide together, and they die. And it's a beautiful story oriented entirely around living, about being alive. I guess it's controversial because they're gay, but it's two human beings making the best of the circumstances they have, and then getting to the point where it's not possible anymore to make it the best. It's not possible anymore to live as a human being, to pursue values as a human being, and therefore they both commit suicide. And again, beautiful, touching. It's episodes like that made The Last of Us a good show. A good show. I don't think it was a downer at all. It's a real upper, because it shows what is possible. It shows what is possible, and it certainly shows what is possible to us, where we don't live in a zombie apocalypse. So many people out there are so down, are so pessimistic, are so concerned. But the reality is, Muslims are not taking over the West anytime soon. And the left is not destroying all your job opportunities anytime soon. And as much as I complain about the theocratic right, America's not going to become a theocracy anytime soon. Although Donald Trump might become president, that is something to be worried about, because that accelerates all the negative trends. But stop being so depressed. Stop being so down. Stop being so committed to your own misery. Stop being so focused on all the things you cannot do. Stop focusing on what you think is missing and all the dangers ahead, and focus on living the best damn life you can live. Focus on being the best human being you can live. Focus on finding a soulmate. Focus on finding a career. Focus on finding a life worth living. And live it. Don't let woke cause you to self-censor and live a different life. Don't let the right abandon your individualism and your reason. Don't let Muslims intimidate you. Live. There's a million ways in which you can live, and live a great life in this world, right now. And every minute you waste on dwelling about, oh my God, these bad things are happening in the world, is a minute you're not living. It's a minute you're not engaging. It's a minute you're not pursuing your values. And your values can still be pursued. Your values are still attainable. So stop being such complainers, so focused on politics, so focused on stuff that's outside of your control, and go live. Live with a capital L. Enjoy life, embrace life. There's so many things that are in your control. There's so many values available to you right now. There's so many benefits that this world has. Go take advantage of them. Instead of being miserable, again, about things you're probably not going to be able to control. And unfortunately, your misery causes you often to embrace politicians, ideologies, solutions that are actually going to make it worse, not better. I'd rather you disengage with politics completely than align yourself with some of the people that some of you align yourself with. who are only going to accelerate whatever decline the West is experiencing. Live, capital L. That's what it's about. Remember, we're about me, my. We're selfish. We're about ourselves. So focus on you. The nation, the politics, that's secondary. That's secondary. Make your life the best life that it can be. And then when you spare time, if you have some stuff, maybe you can make a difference in the political world. So, yeah, God, go out there, find a girlfriend. Stop dwelling about Muslims. Go listen to some great music. Stop dwelling about woke. Go get a fantastic career. And as Shazbot says, famous line, don't forget to eat the strawberries. Or blackberries, or blueberries, or whatever berries you like. Okay. Pursue truth, pursue beauty. Okay. Truth and beauty. That you can still do. All right. We've gone a long time, an hour and 15 minutes. So let's take some of your questions. Please, we're less than halfway where we need to be in order to get to our goal. Remember, these shows are 650. We don't want to start the month off without achieving our goal. So please consider supporting the show with a contribution. You can do so in a sticker, as Danny just did. Thank you, Danny. Or you can do so by asking a question. We've got almost 100 people listening live. We've got a lot of people coming in and out. Oh, I just want to remind everybody, like the show. Just press that little thumbs up button over there. It doesn't cost you anything. It's not that hard. It helps a lot with the algorithm. If you value the show at all and you want to see it do well and you want to see it other people exposed to it, just press the button, the like button. It helps the algorithm. Comment if you can. Sharing is the best, but I know sharing is a big commitment. But share the show. But liking is like there's no commitment at all in liking the show. It just helps with the algorithm. But any interaction you do with the show helps the algorithm and encourages YouTube to expand the list. I just mentioned one other thing about YouTube. I was going to say this at the beginning of the show and I forgot. So I'm now under warning with YouTube. YouTube has decided that I am a threat to the community. So I'm under warning with YouTube. I think a second warning and they drop you. I don't know. But anyway, there is a possibility that the Yaron Brook show just disappears, at least from YouTube. That is possible. And it's pretty hysterical why I'm under warning from YouTube again, right? This is the second time I've been under warning. They retracted the warning the last time. And the warning this time is because of my criticism of what RFK had to say about the COVID vaccines. I mean, it's literally the short video I did with RFK, about RFK and the vaccines, where I defend vaccines. I defend vaccines. And they're claiming I'm going against community standards that because I am providing misinformation about about COVID and the vaccinations. And yet, now you remember the last time this happened, it was when Amish Adulja was on the show, and they wanted to ban that episode because it was providing, quote, misinformation. And Amish is like one of their experts about COVID, and he had to write to them and say, go listen to this. And they had to retract that one. I'm hoping they retract this. I appealed, and they rejected my appeal. So I'm doing a second appeal. And we'll see what happens. I do not want to go to Rumble. I'd rather not leave YouTube. YouTube gives me, YouTube has been great to me. YouTube is fantastic and has given me all these opportunities. Plus, everything runs smoothly on YouTube. Everything works except for this COVID thing where they misinterpreted what I say. But I talk about COVID enough that it's quite possible that I'll get that third strike and I'm out. So beware. I'm still hoping that they will come back and they will retract this warning soon. But it is a little ridiculous that, and it just shows, in a sense, it shows how, well, it just shows how pathetic this is. Even on appeal, supposedly a human being listened to it, they can differentiate between not what they perceive as okay speech and what is not okay, because, hey, I'm conventional when it comes to the COVID vaccines. One of the few things in life I'm conventional on. I actually think the COVID vaccines are good and the boosters are good for the right people. But God, and yet here we are, they are rejecting it somehow. All right, they're taking RFK's side. You'd think he would be the one they were kicking out, not me. All right, thank you. We passed the halfway mark, so we got $320 to go. So go for it, guys. We can make it. Let's see. Ryan says, I love the critique of Knowles. Please do more. You kept asking why do all of his moral assertions? I guess why does he just assert them? Well, he has no answer. I think if he was pressed hard enough, they would have to admit because the pie is fixed. Dark Ages mentality thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is kind of a fixed pie. But I think more importantly, his moral assertions come from tradition, revelation. He is. I don't think he would be embarrassed to say, I know this is true because that's what God says. How do you know what God says? Because it's in our tradition. It's in the book. And I say, well, my God said different. That wouldn't bother him. His God is the right God, and his God is he knows truth is knowable through God. And there's no embarrassment, there's no challenge there. That's just it. Spooky and scary. And so knowledge, in a sense, is a zero sum, is a fixed pie. Knowledge is written in some ancient book. Knowledge is communicated to some unique individuals who have that capacity. That's it. That's what knowledge is. And therefore, you don't need more justification than to say God said it, or it was revealed to me, or really, really smart people have been saying this for 2,000 years, so it must be true. You don't need more than that. Yeah. Robert says, a friend was doing an online training session and she was punished by the government, which was, of course, listening in, because training about the laws, she had to talk about the laws, and you're really not allowed to talk about the laws. So that's China. That's where it's heading. That's the decline of Western civilization. Still holding up, barely, but still holding up. But that's the direction, and that's what technology allows these people to do, right? And of course, you're going to be punished. You're going to be punished no matter what you do, because that's the whole point of non-objective law. It gives them power over you, whether you violate the law or not, because you can't ever tell if you're violating the law or not. All right, RYPNOX, Ripnox, first time super chat. Thank you, Ripnox. Really, really appreciate it. This is great. Thanks for participating. All right, could Biden's plan to price control medication lead to more socialization of R&D? Yes, there's no question. So what will happen is, as the Bidens, it's not the Bidens, as government socializes more and more of drugs, puts price controls on them. Drug companies have less money to invest in R&D. People complain about the lack of innovation. Government says, well, private business won't do R&D anymore. We don't know why. Pharmaceutical companies used to invest a lot in R&D, but they don't anymore. They're being greedy. They're being selfish, so they're not investing in R&D. So we have to invest more. So we need to tax you more. We need to restrict pharmaceutical companies even more. We have to tax them even more so that we can invest in more R&D. Now, R&D is already heavily socialized. So much of basic science today, vast majority of basic science today is done by the government. But the more we restrict the ability of our businesses to make a profit, the more we restrict our ability of our businesses to innovate and to go in new original directions, the more we are moving the world towards greater socialization of research and development, which is horrific. Fender Harper says, after listening to your books and others, I have come to hold that the best measure of a currency's health is its purchasing power. Is that an accurate way to think about it? The US dollar seems to be healthiest at that rate. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, currencies that, unhealthy currencies are currencies that are losing their purchasing value quickly. That's what inflation does. So look at Zimbabwe, look at Argentina. And there's no accident that the Libertarian nominee for president in Argentina wants to replace the Argentinian pesos with the dollar. Why the dollar? Because the dollar is, of all the global currencies out there, it's the healthiest. It doesn't mean it's healthy, but it's the healthiest. I wish he would replace the Argentinian peso with some kind of gold standard, but he's afraid of that and maybe too radical for him, or maybe he's not a believer in the gold standard. I don't know. But that would be better. But a dollar is a big improvement over the peso. So yes, the purchasing power and the stability of that purchasing power are key. Andrew says, a country's self-esteem depends on its recognizing individual rights. A country's self-esteem depends on its recognizing individual rights. Absolutely. The West values individualism implicitly, but increasingly rejects it explicitly. How does that contradiction affect your view of the West's survival? Well, yes, I mean, of course that contradiction exists and it continues constantly. I still think that the West, the erosion in the West is going to be slow, because the reality is that people so like the benefits of the individualism, call it, that's out there. They want to live that life even though they don't understand where it comes from, its origins. And they're going to keep insisting, and this is why, we talk about the pendulum going from left to right. And the pendulum goes, because whenever they really get a sense that the way they're living is under real threat, they vote the bastards out. So they're only willing to go so far in letting the enemies of individualism gain the upper hand and dominate, right? Now, yeah, at some point, the explicit philosophy will win out. But it takes longer. And of course, the longer it takes, the more time the better people have to argue the opposite ideas, whether it's objectivists or whether it's just better people out there. And there are better people out there that are arguing for reason and for forms of individualism. So you've got to, you can't just look at the explicit philosophy in a culture at any given point in time and say, okay, well, it's finished. It's doomed. People have free will. People can change. And as long as good philosophy is still alive, and as long as we have the ability to spread it, to educate people about it, to talk about it, then there's a chance that things get reversed. And I think we have that chance, and I think we have that freedom, and I think we have the time. Because I don't think everything's falling off a cliff. I think it's slowly deteriorating. It's slowly getting worse, but it's not falling off a cliff. Why? Not because our intellectuals are so great, not because the philosophy is so great, not because our politicians are so great, but because basically people like the freedoms that they have, and they're not quite ready to give them up, and implicitly they still embrace it. And we're in so much better shape than Rome. I think this is an important point to make. Rome was always authoritarian, certainly post-Republic, it was authoritarian. It was very much at the whim of a dictator. Many of those dictators, many of those emperors were completely nuts. Think Caligula and Nero. I mean, they make our political leaders seem like angels in comparison. Rome had no enlightenment to come before it. Now, it had the Greeks. So it had some Aristotle. It definitely had Plato. But Plato was more dominant than Aristotle. Plato dominated both Roman pagan society and Christianity. And there was no counter. There was no well-established, well-established Aristotelians fighting for liberty. And if you add to that, that today we have a much better understanding of Aristotle. We have a much better understanding of individualism. We have the Enlightenment. We have the Renaissance. We have so much more positive cultural baggage, positive cultural context. And Rome also only dominated a small part of the world. There was a completely different civilization in China. There was a completely different civilization in Persia that was gaining. Ultimately, in Arabia, there was a completely different civilization, although much of it had become Christian, and some of it was under Roman control, but there was a whole area that was outside of Roman control. I mean, the world was unknown to the Romans. As much as Rome was a big deal, the United States of America has more global dominance today, and has had for the last 200 years, in spirit and in wealth, than the Roman Empire ever had. The United States has more influence, and put aside the United States, Western civilization has more influence on the world today than Rome did. Western civilization has more outshoots all over the world than Rome ever had. Western civilization is fundamentally free. Individuals are mostly free. Nobody in Rome was free. We're so much richer. We know so much more about the world. Like, take engineering knowledge. In Rome, they had pretty advanced engineering knowledge, a few people, very small group. And once Rome fell, the engineering was disappeared. But think about engineering knowledge in the world today. Engineering knowledge that all comes from innovations that came out of Western civilization. But we have millions of engineers in the West. Tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of engineers in Asia. In India, in China, in South Korea, in Taiwan, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in every country. We have probably millions of engineers even in Africa. That is, civilization is not exclusive. It's not small. It's the fruits of civilization, the benefits of civilization, which primarily in Rome, benefited the wealthy and the people associated with Rome itself. But most people under Roman rule didn't know the difference. So elites and the citizens of Rome itself, and even they're not clear. Today, the benefits of civilization, of Western civilization, are everywhere, all over the world. So to take that away, to see that completely gone, to eviscerate that, it's going to be really hard because you're affecting everybody's lives. When Rome fell, did the lives of common peasants in Gaul, in the middle of France, change much? No. Instead of Roman Empire, they had a French, Gaulish king, also who came from somewhere, right? It's one of those German tribes. Towards the end of the Roman Empire, they were probably starting to become Christian already, and they stayed Christian because Christian is what everybody expected them to do. And the Romans were, destroyed all their pagan temples anyway, so what choice did they have? They were going to worship a god. It was going to be a Christian god. But they were still massively superstitious and believed in lots of different things that had nothing to do with Christianity. Nothing in their lives really changed. Maybe warfare a little bit, because warfare became more local. That changed dramatically. There wasn't a professional army anymore. It's every lord, was involved. Post-Rome, the world became more violent. So, but if Western civilization goes, the lives of everybody are affected. Everybody. Including the people who oppose Western civilization. Everybody's lives becomes worse. This is a global phenomenon with global reach and global impact. So it's much different than Rome. It's so much more well established. It's so much more well solidified. It's so much more, and yes, we're losing touch with the fundamental ideas that made it possible. Some people are. But there's still a core group that's still holding on to those ideas, whether it's us, whether it's other classical liberals, maybe it's even people who are not completely committed to individual rights, but just have fragments of it on the left and on the right that are not ready to trash it all yet. That helps. I don't think you have a real appreciation for how good life is today and how many freedoms you enjoy today and how widespread this good life is in the world today, relative to Rome, or relative to 300 years ago, relative to even 150 years ago if you think globally, or 100 years ago, or 60 years ago if you think globally. Arguably, you could argue that over the last 50, 60 years, Western civilization has increased its influence, not decreased it. Now, China's moving away. So China is a defeat in that it's moving away from progress towards civilization. But the rest of Asia, the rest of the world, inspired. And again, the idea that we should cower before a few immigrants, the idea that we should cower before a few primitive states, to cower before Putin, cower before anybody, is absurd and ridiculous. Ali, people don't know that not all Muslims are the same. There are tons and tons of different interpretations of Islam. Not defending the religion, but treating 1 billion Muslims as one unit is not wise. I agree completely. And viewing Islam, qua Islam, as the enemy is, I think, a massive mistake. And I've said so. The enemy is a certain form of fundamentalist Islam. It's a jihadism, Islamic totalitarianism, however we want to call it. But yeah, there are plenty of secular Muslims. There are plenty of Muslims who don't take their religion that seriously. There are plenty of Muslims who are religious but don't want to inflict that religion on other people. And there are plenty of Muslims who've been westernized, almost completely. Some of them even live in the Middle East, and they've been westernized. Now, the sad thing about the Muslim world is some of it is moving in the wrong direction. It's becoming less Western rather than more Western. Partially that's the fault of the West. Partially it's their own fault. But, it's a mistake to paint all Muslims the same. It's a mistake to view all immigrants as the same. I mean, I remember getting an Uber ride in Copenhagen. It was Copenhagen. And the Uber driver wanted to pick me up in a particular place because if he picked me up right in front of my hotel, the taxi drivers would go after him. So he wanted to be a little away from the taxis. I went, and then the whole time he complained about the lack of economic freedom in Copenhagen, in Europe, and he was telling him about all his ambitions and about, talked about how great Uber was and how the taxi drivers and their political cronies were awful. And then he described to me that he wanted to move to the United States. The United States was where the real action was. That's where liberty was. That's where freedom was. He didn't want to be regulated. He didn't want to be taxed. He wanted to be left alone. And he wanted to pursue his own life. And he wanted to be successful. And he wanted to achieve stuff. And it was like, God, I wish I met some Europeans like this Who was this Uber driver? He was an immigrant from Afghanistan. Afghanistan, one of the most barbaric places in the world. But put an Afghan in Copenhagen and he becomes westernized, and some of them become so westernized as they don't like Europe anymore because it's too authoritarian. I want more people like that, not less. Now, I'm not saying all Afghan immigrants are like that. I wish that were true. Not all of them are like that. But the more we embrace Western values, the more we stand up for Western values, the more we articulate Western values, the more we integrate them into our society by allowing them to work and forcing them to work, by not giving them welfare, the more they will become like that. Much of the lack of integration of Muslim immigrants in Europe is caused by the fact that they can't work, they can't get a job, and they're excluded from much of society by the Europeans. And this is certainly true in France, which puts them in their own neighborhoods, gives them their own jobs, doesn't want to have anything to do with them, doesn't impose the rule of law on them, and gives them welfare. That's not how you integrate. All right, David. I think that this is David's first Super Chat question. I think I saw that. Yes, David, thank you. Really appreciate it. David says, I'm 17 years old, and I think many kids my age would be interested in objectivism, but wouldn't want to read long novels like Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead. What videos or books would I recommend to introduce them to objectivism? Well, I do think Anthem is not a bad introduction, although it only focuses on one element of objectivism. But I think that was most people respond quite positively to it. Just to introduce them to name Ayn Rand. I think watching some of Ayn Rand's interviews on YouTube, some of her, really all the interviews she does on YouTube, is a great way to introduce them to the ideas. She is so sharp, quick, interesting, a little strange in the way she looks, probably to a young person today. But you can't not be affected by that mind and by those eyes and intrigued by what she has to say. You know, and then it's a matter of, if you don't think they're willing to actually read a novel, then it's a matter of getting them to read some nonfiction essays. But I find nonfiction essays quite hard. But if they can read The Virtue of Selfishness or Capitalism, Not Known Ideal. But again, those are not easy essays. Not easy essays, right? But I think her interviews, I think some of her talks. Leonard Peikoff has an introduction to objectivism video up online, which I think is pretty good for a young audience. And then, you know, there's so much content up there today by so many different people, but, you know, you don't want it too watered down. You want the real thing. So I think Ayn Rand's essays are the best way to start. But really, to the extent that you can get them intrigued enough to read Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead, there's no better introduction than that. Really no better introduction than that. But yeah, Anthem is great, and the nonfiction is great. And yeah, I mean, we don't yet have a really, really great intro book. I think Don Watkins has one maybe coming out, but we don't yet have an intro book that you can just send somebody to. We've got a few advanced books. Yeah, somebody correct me if I'm missing something. I'm missing a resource. OPA is not something you should read as a first thing. ITUE is not something you should read as a first thing. Both of those are books that are much more advanced. It's now, Philosophy Who Needs It. That's a great essay. That's a great essay to get people interested in her ideas. Philosophy Who Needs It. Right. All right. Richard says, what makes adopting objectivism worth the effort? I think most people would underestimate that effort. Yeah, I mean, what makes it worth the effort is a better life. It's living in harmony with your values, living in harmony with the world around you. It's happiness. It's a much greater commitment to values, a much better understanding of your values. It's worth the effort because it's going to make your life better. It's going to give you the tools. Objectivism gives you the tools to understand the world and to understand how to live in it. I'll say it again. It gives you the tools to understand the world and how to live in it. And what could be more valuable than that? How much effort does that require? As much as necessary. Every other ideology out there in some ways undermines your ability to understand the world, and certainly undermines your ability to live within it, because it gives you sets of, now it has elements of truth in it, because if they didn't have elements of truth, then they'd have died a long time ago. They have just enough to keep you going, but objectivism gives you consistent truth and doesn't undermine you, doesn't chop your legs off at the knees. It actually lets you live by your choices, live by your mind, live by your values, and not feel guilty about it, and embrace it, and do the best that you can to flourish within that context. All right, we're still quite a bit short of our goal. We've got about 90 people watching right now. I don't know, $3 by everybody watching would get us to where we need to be. Just think of it as a value for value. You're listening to the show, which means you value it somewhat. I'm providing a value. Let's trade. A lot of you have already done that through the super chats. I thank you. You can do it through a sticker. You can do it through asking more questions. We've still got time for more questions. Okay, Ryan. Ryan says, the stickers are a great way to support the show. Yes, they are. Thanks, Ryan. Hopper Campbell says, Western civilization might not be that fragile. It seems magnificently resilient given that everyone is operating under bad ideas. Yes. And everyone's trying to destroy it in some way, whether they know it or not. The bad ideas are antagonistic to everything about Western civilization. And yet it survives. And more than survives, people thrive in it. And again, we can focus on the bad. We can focus on all the negatives. We can focus on all the cases where it's bad. But yeah, somebody had me review a song. That'll get us closer to target. Or better, review a TV show. That'll get us way to the target. And maybe even review a movie. That'll get us way beyond the target. I promise to do it faster than I have in the past. Correct me if this is wrong, but I owe you guys the Star Trek. Shazbot is owed Star Trek, an episode of Star Trek, and I owe Mary Benz her novelette. I still need to read that, and yeah. So that's my assignment for hopefully for next week. All right, Robert says, hard to say if it sounds better than before without doing a direct comparison, but it sounds very good. Good. I mean, I like the system much, much smaller. I went from having a board and a preamp to having one box that gives me a lot more flexibility than I had before. So I'm actually pretty excited. I've only played with it a little bit. I installed it yesterday. It's called a Rodecaster Duo. Really cool by Rode. And so I installed it yesterday. I still have to play with it. I think I can actually get my phone on there through Bluetooth and actually take calls on this. So use speakers and microphone for the calls. But also potentially, and I wonder what you guys think of this. Here's a question for you guys. What do you guys think of me taking live calls during some shows? Not every show, but like having a phone number, setting up a phone number to take calls through this setup, and having you not just do super chat questions, but actually take live calls. How would I charge you for that? I wonder if there's a mechanism by which I could charge you like I charge for super chats. If anybody has any ideas on how to do that, maybe we can do that. If there's value in me taking actual calls. All right, Dan asked, what did you and your family do during the 6-Day War in 1967? So I was 6 years old, and we were actually living in London, in England at the time. I think we'd arrived in England in 1965 or 6, maybe 66. And we stayed in England for another till 69, if I remember right. And so I was 6 years old, and we were in London, and the war broke out. My dad volunteered to go back to Israel and fight. So basically, he, after a couple of days where he was trying to figure this out with the embassy and how to get back to Israel, and there was a flight taking Israelis back to Israel who wanted to volunteer. And actually, Topol, the famous actor, musician who did Fiddler on the Roof, was on that flight. He was going back to Israel as well to volunteer. And my dad flew back to Israel. But by the time he got there, given that it was a 6-day war, the war was almost over. He was sent to the Egyptian front, and he worked in a field hospital on the Egyptian front while he was there. One of the stories he tells is the U.S. Army was short on equipment, so they gave him a pair of Egyptian boots, because when the Egyptians, when Israel attacked, the Egyptians started retreating. They ran. They literally ran. They retreated by running away, and they took off their boots and they ran barefoot. And if you look at photos, from that war, from the Sinai Desert, you will see long trails of boots from where they had run. So he got Egyptian boots. Anyway, he was there. We were in England. I don't remember much of that, but I assume my mother was, frantic because, again, phone calls, no cell phones, landlines were hard, long distance phones and all of that. So that's where we were in 67. Richard says, thanks for your answer about the benefits of objectivism. I would add realistic clarity as a benefit. Yeah, clarity, knowledge of right and wrong. There's rampant confusion in the world today from religion, including woke. Objectivism can cut through the crap. Yeah, so it gives you a real tool to understand the world out there, including the ideas that people hold, the politics, the whole thing. It gives you the sharp tool to understand it. And also, when used properly, to figure out who your friends are and who your enemies are. Too many people confuse those. Liam says, when you were growing up in Israel, did everyone think America was heaven? No, I don't remember talking much about America. I don't remember, we didn't really have a view of America. I mean, remember, we didn't have television when I was young. Now, I moved to America, and I lived in America 74 to 76 as a teenager, and I hated it. I hated America, hated my experiences here. Did not like Americans, hated the American educational system that I was exposed to 8th and 9th grade. Yeah, did not have a good experience in America. So, no, I mean, Israel was very self-contained. We had a great life over there. We thought we had the best life anyway. And we didn't have television blasting America to us. And I was a kid, and yeah, I had no, America was not real to me in any kind of way. Not like today with the internet and with television and everything. So no, I don't think we thought America was heaven. America was this amazing place. We were also very, and this is important, we were very nationalist. We were trained and grew up to think that everything was Israel. So I have this repulsion against nationalism, partially because it's evil, but also partially because that's how I grew up. Ryan says, please make a custom sound for Michael Knowles whenever the death of civilization sounds like a whimper. Yeah, that's part of the things I need to figure out how this thing works. I have to load up, like the beginning of the show, music. I have to load up custom sounds. I have to do different things. Maybe when somebody gives a first time super chat, I'll have a little clapping or cheering or something. So, all to be worked out over the next few days, weeks, as I figure out how this new wonderful tool can be used to make this show more entertaining. Clark says, do you think the bad guys have opted for a managed decline because they can't get the abrupt apocalyptic collapse of Western civilization? No, I mean, look, I don't think the bad guys want the West to collapse. They want to be able to milk it for all it is. Now, some do, like the radical environmentalists want it to collapse. You know, Michael Knowles kind of wants it because he wants to live in 1220, but he doesn't really. Does he want not to have a YouTube channel? Does he want not to have all the material benefits that Western civilization provides him? So no, none of them actually want the West to decline. Not explicitly. They might implicitly want it. But it's not that they're managing anything. You're giving them way too much credit by thinking they have a plan. They don't have a plan. There's no master villains sitting somewhere, I'm scheming to collapse civilization, and maybe we should do it slowly because we can extract more resources from it, or maybe we should do it fast because... No, I mean, there's just no master villain. There's no plan. There's no... Way too much credit. This is just the inevitable consequence of bad ideas. Not that the bad ideas know that this is what they're leading to. Again, with some exceptions, like the radical environmentalists and the radical religionists who know they want a more primitive world. Harper Campbell, Michael Knowles give me those slick Nick Fuentes vibes. That 1220 clip he did originally came from Nick Fuentes. Really? Well, Nick Fuentes is beyond the pale. I mean, like, I would debate, like Michael Knowles, I would not debate Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is disgusting and horrible. Michael Knowles is too, but not there's a certain threshold he's never crossed. And Nick Fuentes is not serious. He's just, he's just disgusting. I make a Max Stirner made that argument. He was a complete clown. Thanks, Iron Meerkat. All right, we're about $200 short, guys. So $3 each. No. Anyway, we should be able to make it. Shouldn't be that hard. Let's see. Sabine just posted Capitalism is good. Starts out good, but develops towards conventionality. Yeah, I think I watched Sabine's Capitalism is good. I would argue it's conventional from the beginning. Somebody wanted me to do maybe it was you, John, wanted me to do a commentary on it, but it's so conventional. I wonder if you guys all listen, if we had to sit through the whole thing, if that would be too much. So I'll still consider it, but it's very conventional, I think. It's kind of sad. She gets stuff, but then she misses so much even when she's getting stuff. That old doodle bunny, when Nazi concentration camps and Soviet gulags, basically the same thing, yet the former is viewed as far more unspeakable demonic. I mean, there's a sense in which the Nazi concentration camps were worse. And that sense is that it was systematic. It was factory-like. It was the explicit mechanization of death and destruction of whole peoples. The gulags were, a place where Stalin could rationalize he was sending his enemies. And of course, he had lots of enemies. And even in the gulags, they all died and they were horrible and they were disgusting places, but they didn't have the systematized death and destruction. They didn't have, gas chambers. I mean, that is just a level of industrializing death that's just horrific. Just horrific. So the gulags are evil. The concentration camps are just a little bit worse. And I can't think of anything more evil than them, right? Clark says, was Murray Rothbard a good economist? Yes, I think he was. I think he makes a lot of interesting economic observations. He even makes some cultural observations that are pretty good. But it's when he's As a political philosopher and as a moral philosopher, he's awful. Ryan, if everyone here shares the Knowles show on X or Facebook, your subscriptions would go up. Let's make it happen. Yeah, I mean, please share. I've got those short clips of Knowles. Please share. The more you share, the more we get exposure, and the more we'll grow. Tubular Tubester. Thank you, Tubester. Another first-time super chatter. I think that's 3 in one show. There might be a record for first-time super chatters. The lawyer that hired me said that I'm doing good work, but that the firm is not in a position to keep me on now. I have about 4 months before I pass the bar exam, and then I can work as a lawyer. Should I take government benefits? Thoughts? I mean, I don't think you, it's not like, I think you shouldn't take government benefits, right? I don't think it's immoral to take government benefits. You pay into them, you're going to pay a lot of taxes as a lawyer. You're going to fund those benefits and more, right? It really more is a question of whether you want to take those benefits. That is, would you rather take those benefits and find some odd ends job for the next 4 months? You know, what does it do to you psychologically? Do you want to sit around doing nothing for 4 months while you accept the benefits? I suggest you get a job. Find a job somehow. Now, if you can't get a job, then take the benefits. But I just think for your self-esteem and for your own sanity, it's better for you. But I don't think there's anything morally wrong per se with taking the benefits if you decide that is best for you given the circumstances, or if you can't find a job. But I definitely think earning, you know, and through your own labor is always better than living off of other people. Even though you're going to pay into it, so it's your money, it's still psychologically uncomfortable. And then you're not doing anything. It's that good for you. I take it you're young. Don't you want to go out there and do something, even if it's something, you know? Isn't there something you really want to do that you never done? Some kind of work you want to do, something, right? That you might want to experience for a few months before you pass the bar. So I don't think it's immoral to do for a period. Just consider whether it's the best option you face. Again, because you're paying into the system. Thanks. I'm giving it some thought as I paid into them. I'd much prefer to work, though, but I have to study, too. So, yeah, I get it. Mika, something I love about Poland is they embrace shopping malls. Yeah, but the whole world embraces shopping malls. Where don't they embrace shopping malls? Indeed, in some respects, the whole world is one big shopping mall. Michael says, Yaron, have you already changed the world in some small way? Yeah. I mean, I've changed some of you, right? To the extent that I've had an impact on your lives, on some of your lives, I've changed the world. There's a saying in Judaism, he who saves one individual saves the entire world, or something like that. That's a kind of a loose translation. And there's a lot of truth to that. What is the world if not individuals? By saving an individual, you saved a world. You saved a life. A life is a world. So yes, it's one mind at a time. All right, quickly, Jonathan, thank you. Fred Harper, thank you. These are all people who are doing stickers and helping us get closer to the goal. John Bales, thank you. I'm just scrolling to see the different stickers. Catherine, thank you. Wes, $50. Really appreciate it. Danny, I think I thanked earlier, and it doesn't go any further back. So those are the stickers. Thank you guys for the support through stickers. You can still support the show through a sticker and get us closer to the goal. That would be great. I've only got 2 questions left, so we're about to end the show. We're 2 hours in. Frank says, Douglas Murray interviewed Bruce Gilley about defending colonialism. Is Western civilization in danger of demise because of the legacy colonies from Europe? No, I don't think so at all. I'm not sure in what way that would be. I think the colonies whose people are emigrating into Western Europe are the ones who appreciate the values that the West left there. They're the ones who are probably going to be going to assimilate, in many respects, assimilate best. But so no, I certainly don't think the colonies are what are undermining. It's people who have never been exposed to the West who are most likely to be undermining anything. All right. Apollo, Zeus. Are we making a dent in the culture? Yes. Making lots of little dents. Lots of little dents. Yes. No question about it. And there's still a lot of good stuff being produced in this culture. And there's still a lot of decent intellectuals and people who are not quite willing to give up on the West and not quite willing to just fold and give in, but who are interested and willing to fight for the culture. And I don't think you should give up on it. I don't think you should walk away from it. There's still a lot to be done and a lot to be achieved. We are making dents. We're making more than dents. Think about the millions of people who read Ayn Rand. That has already made a massive impact on the culture, and it's only going to increase. Only going to increase. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, rest of your weekend. Right? And don't forget to like the show before you leave, please. Before you leave, just press that like button. You can do it on your phone, on your iPad, on your video. You can just press it. That helps a lot with the algorithm. Don't forget, if you want to support the show on a regular basis, you can do it on Patreon or on yaronbrookshow.com/support. That's PayPal. And yeah, I will see you all. We're taking tomorrow off. I will see you all on Monday for a news roundup. So look forward to that. Have a great weekend. See you all then. Bye, everybody.